Hello, we're so happy to have you all here today. We are SayoStudio Science podcast, and our studio creates science visuals to communicate science and capture the excitement and fun of science and help explain how it works. So we get to work with scientists at all sorts of different places, at universities and companies and nonprofits. And so we are excited to have you all today. I'm Nicole Fuller, and we have Claire Agosti here. So, Claire, before we jump into the rest, I think we were thinking we would just give a little overview of some of the fun things that we've been working on in the studio before we talk about who our guest is today.
Yeah, we just kind of want to cue our listeners in on kind of our typical workload and just what we do here and what's going on behind the scenes, what keeps us excited about our job. So we are working on a handful of things. We probably won't go through it all, but some of the more exciting ones include a microscopy buyer's guide. That's going to be a fun challenge, just making it visually exciting to the point, and give kind of the basics of microscopy at the same time.
Mhm.
And then
Yeah, sorry to interject, but it's kind
Mhm.
of a fun combo of both design and illustrations. I
Yeah.
think that'll be fun.
Yes, that's a good point. And we don't always um, have a lot of design projects. So when we do have exciting ones, it's fun for us.
Mhm.
It's kind of exercising another muscle.
Definitely.
And then another one we're working on is a chemistry textbook cover. And so that's a little bit more straightforward, but still exciting to see our art on textbook cover.
Mhm.
And then also a deep sea illustration. So this is kind of Nicole's famous underwater landscape scenes that have a lot of pieces, are very detailed, very realistic, and tell um, give a lot of information in one image.
Thanks. Yeah, I just as you were saying that, I thought of something really nerdy. I just say it's a niche that I've kind of flown into over the years.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know how I've gotten to do so many deep sea ocean sort of ecology pieces, but I'm excited about this one. So we can tell you more when we're further along.
Yes. And then another one we're working on is a chronic wasting disease coloring book, which sounds kind of funny. You wouldn't think those things would go together, but it's just an informative coloring book and that aims at teaching the younger population about important scientific topics that affect their local area.
Yeah, and for that one, I think it's interesting that their tactic, which I think is very smart, is realizing that a lot of times it's kids that end up educating adults. So I think that's some of their thought process there. So
Yeah, and that's actually something that I feel like we could all keep in mind in general.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good number to go with it. There's a couple more, but,
I
we do
agree.
have
That's a good summary.
we do have some fun projects that we've been wrapping up with Google Quantum AI
Mhm.
and some more in the pipeline, so that's really exciting. We love working with them and, um, the challenge of bringing, quantum physics to life is always exciting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Their patient explanation of their research is always, like you said, a fun challenge for us to translate into art. Yeah, I think I love hearing what we've been working on because it's kind of fun to reflect.
Mhm.
And it's pretty diverse. So
It is. And it's always
okay.
surprising, I feel like the the breadth of it, even though this is what we do all the time, it's always yeah, surprising and, yeah, just always makes me feel really lucky to be doing what we do.
Yes. It's a great reminder. I lose sight of that sometimes, but it is one reason, one of many that I really do love it. And
Yeah,
I think it's something that we're really lucky as a studio that we get to do such a broad range.
yeah,
Um, yeah.
yeah.
And so that kind of is a good segue into introducing our guest today. So today we are speaking with our good friend and our often collaborator, Maayan Harel.
Mm,
And so she's a science illustrator who is somewhat of a generalist as well. So she has an atmospheric sciences background before coming into illustration, but she does a lot of different topics as well. So we're excited to talk with her today and have her on and talk about kind of the state of illustration, like how it's changed over the years, how new technologies like AI are impacting things. So we're really excited to have her on and have you all join us. Yeah, we love having other artists that are focused on communicating science, as well as the scientists themselves
mm.
on our podcast, but we'd also love to hear what you all like to hear and what is really getting you excited. So if you can let us know in the comments, we would love that. And of course, we welcome your likes and subscribes. So thanks for joining us today, and here we go. Hello, everybody. We are so excited to have our guest, Maayan Harel, on SayoStudio Science today on our podcast. So, this is where we talk about everything art and science. And Maayan is an incredible science illustrator who has been doing this for a little bit. I'll let her give more history, but she has worked at the sorry, I almost said my background. She has worked at the National Geographic and the Smithsonian and gives workshops and, other seminars for scientists to help them communicate their science, and so we are excited to have you today.
Thank you.
And yeah, so I guess just to get us started, I was wondering if you could, let us know kind of what areas of science you enjoy communicating and what kind of um, yeah, like artwork you do for it. And the one thing that I forgot in the intro that I'm going to say right now because I'm really
Mhm,
excited to hear you talk about it is the
mhm.
sculptural aspect of what you do.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I've kind of my academic background is actually atmospheric science.
Okay.
And I have gotten to do a little bit of, illustration work in the atmospheric science, kind of geosciences world, and I always really love doing that. But I really love kind of, uh I guess I love learning about different topics because I end up working with a lot of biologists and people in fields like neuroscience and, psychology and so I'm very much kind of a generalist,
Uh-huh.
but, I have a really kind of special place in my heart for ancient human history, and that's kind of my favorite area to work in, um, and work with sculpture as well, which is a really great technique that actually, Fernando Baptista of National Geographic is the one that, introduced me to it. It's working with Super Sculpey, and then you kind of photograph the sculpture, and you can, kind of paint on top of it digitally and get really cool results.
Whoa. Oh, that's so much fun.
It's super fun. So whenever I have even if it's not in that particular field and I have an opportunity, like a project that I think that the sculpture will work well for, I like introducing that. And I don't do it as often as I do kind of more kind of classic digital work, but it's so much fun that when I get the opportunity to do it, yeah, I really love incorporating that.
I
Yeah.
never would have guessed that. Yeah, just that intersection of hands-on, sculpting and then to the digital, that's so fascinating. I never would have
Yeah.
guessed that was the technique.
Yeah, it's really cool. It also solves a lot of the kind of, 3D and, like, how does the light hit something, all that kind of
Mhm.
thing. If you kind of, like, light your sculpture and then you can take some time taking nice pictures, and when you get sort of the right lighting, and the right angle, then it really helps to, like, bring something to life, I guess, in a way.
Well,
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's one of the reasons I like to use 3D programs,
Yes. Mhm.
but I can imagine that there's something really just that tactile feel, like, you
Yeah.
really understand the cavities and what comes out and what goes in a way
Yeah.
that if you're just doing it on the computer and manipulating things,
Mhm.
uh,
Mhm.
it's not quite the same,
It's
so
yeah, it's not quite the same. I think it's really satisfying. Like, there's something very, very satisfying about it. And because I do it with the end result is usually an image, so I'll reuse the same clay. So there's also this process of, like, I'll make the thing, and then in most cases, the thing will get squished so that I will reuse the clay for something else. But
Do
it's
you
actually not as easy as squished because it hardens a little bit and stuff like that, but it's reusable, unless
Yeah.
you bake it. So, yeah, it's very fun. Highly recommend Super Sculpey, just like
I
getting
can't
some
believe
Super
I've never
Sculpey and playing
asked
with
this
it.
before.
Mhm.
Do you do other ceramics work, or is it mostly just the sculpture?
No, not really. I mean, yeah, no, I just kind of fell in love with this the Super Sculpey. I did sculpture in high school and stuff like that, so I've used other mediums before, but nowadays I really
Mhm.
don't. Yeah, I really it's just my favorite kind of thing to play with. Yeah. Yeah. It's
That's
very, very
fascinating.
fun. Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
Um,
Okay, so Claire, help me out here. I can't decide if we should ask Mayan more about her work or if we should go into kind of, I don't know, the state of the world and why science communication is so important right now and kind of, how we're feeling about the industry. Um
I think it's a good opportunity to go into the why. I
mhm.
think it's yeah, just fun having, us 3 science illustrators here together and, um, kind of
Yeah.
going into that conversation of, yeah, why what we do
I
is so
mean,
essential, especially now with the climate. Yeah,
yes,
I
that's what I was thinking with your atmospheric
Yeah, that's
science
actually one of
background.
the things that originally like, when I've been doing this for over a decade, so when I originally kind of got started in it, I really was thinking a lot more about that, about climate, and I unfortunately haven't had as many I feel like climate research is always kind of under attack, you don't get funding, it's never kind of the fields that get the most funding, and, because there's not commercial value usually attached to the projects.
Mhm.
So that was kind of one of my main motivations, even getting into atmospheric science. And then when it came to kind of the idea of working more in science communication and in visual communication, it's amazing. We're hired like this is our we're hired by clients, and I've gotten to kind of do some work on it for atmospheric science textbook and things like that. But it's very much in that world. There's not as much. Yeah, there's just not as much work in it because I think of the funding issue,
I'm hearing
which obviously now is, like, not as like, it's kind of more prevalent, this funding issue, than just in atmospheric science.
that's
Mhm.
true.
Yeah,
Yeah. The
um
unfortunate thing, I mean, there's many unfortunate things about
Mhm,
not having funding for communicating climate
mhm,
and the reality of that. But one of
mhm,
the things that makes me sad is that, I mean, it does have huge economic impacts. It will,
for
but
sure.
we don't wanna
Mhm,
face that, and,
mhm, yeah,
yeah,
yeah, it's true.
um
And interestingly, though, like, I think around climate change, like, that's been, like, in the last 10 years, maybe longer, 15, that's, like, I think seeing what science communication done in that field is Mhm.
absolutely incredible, and
That's
I think that's
true.
one of the most
Yeah.
clear examples of how, SciComm can change politics
Yeah,
and
and
change
I
the direction of funding, and
yeah.
still not quite there, but
Yeah. No, but it's true. I think some of the most impactful stuff I've seen has actually been in the photography world, where
Mhm.
you think about photographing climate change. There's some really,
Yeah.
really powerful like films and images and things like that, um,
Mhm.
that have done like some really amazing work in that field.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think like also
the last 5 years, like what we did, like what happened to with COVID, for me at least, I saw like COVID completely change kind of this career even. Like it became so much more visible. It became so much more acceptable and more viable as a career path than when I started. And that's another like huge kind of I mean, a positive thing as far as I'm concerned that came out of COVID is this understanding that the communication aspect of science is super important, that it's not just for scientists, it's for
Mhm.
everyone.
Yeah.
And it can impact everyone, especially today. Like people really do need to be scientifically literate in order to kind of live in the society that we live in the like in the world that we
Mhm.
live in. It's a complicated world.
And do
Yes.
you think so, like, COVID specifically for science illustration, do you think that
hmm
has and do you think that's
For me,
because it's
yeah, for me, yeah. I was actually I was for a very long time in my career. I was part time freelance. So I was, you know, a master's student during part of it, and then I was working at the LA Zoo, at it as a science illustrator, but it was a part-time job, and then I was part-time freelance. And, I didn't really see a way to make this kind of a full-time freelance career for a very long time. And COVID really kind of changed that. I feel like everyone was stuck in front of a screen. You know, you had to kind of look at things. Then you had all these images of the virus, and then I started seeing these,
Yeah.
I think there was a feature in Nature, or there was some kind of, there were a couple of features where they started talking about like why, how do we even have these images of this virus? Like, who is it that's making these things? And they started interviewing, a couple of, one is a medical illustrator, and then I saw another one, some really great artists. They started getting kind of featured, and then like obviously, once this is kind of known as a career, it becomes kind of more acceptable to think, "Oh, I can hire someone to help me."
Mhm.
And just visually, like the design level of the world that we live in, like we're so used to things being so aesthetically pleasing, that I mean, I'm trying to think when I was in grad school, like I feel like the websites of most of the professors seemed like you're not going to spend a lot of time on this because then it looks like you're spending a lot of time on this instead of on your research. You know what I mean? Like
Yes.
it's like there wasn't it. I
I've
don't
even
think that
had
it was
people
like
say that to us
intentionally that
before.
way, but what? Sorry?
I've even had people say that to us before for proposal
Yeah.
graphics, like, "Well, we
Oh,
don't want it to look
really?
too pretty because we don't want it to look like we."
That's funny.
So,
I haven't had that happen to me before
yeah,
as an illustrator. They have no one's asked me not to make it too
yeah.
pretty, but yeah.
But no, this is so interesting because you and I have talked before about how
Mhm.
many more science illustrators, science animators,
So
designers there
many
are now,
There's so much
but
more
I'd never
work.
tied that
Yeah.
together with COVID before, and I think you're really right.
Oh, I saw it because I started going full-time freelance right it was, um, it was like maybe a year, almost a year into COVID that I transitioned, maybe
Oh, I
less than a
didn't
year.
realize that. I thought you were doing it
Yeah.
longer.
Yeah, I left my
Oh,
job at the LA Zoo because I knew that I
okay.
was moving, and so I started with like, "Well, am I gonna try and find another part-time thing, or am I gonna try and be full-time?" And I
Yeah.
was like, "Okay, I'll try and be full-time," and I realized that this is kind of a good time to try and be full-time because I saw so many more there's so many more than there were. Like, it's
Mhm.
so much more common, and I don't think it's a bad thing. I think, you know, I think I was used to I actually remember when I was in school for science illustration, them telling us, like, "You're going to have to justify your existence as a career." And I
Wow.
found that to be true in the beginning. I don't find
Uh-huh.
that to be true anymore at all. I don't think people ask
Uh-huh.
me, "Oh, why would you do that?"
Yeah.
That's not something that I get asked anymore, but I did get asked that, like,
Mhm.
right out of school. It's like, "Can't you just take a
Definitely.
photo? Like, why do you need this?" You know, like, I got asked those questions pretty
Yeah.
regularly.
And
So,
that's
yeah.
something kind of fun just to point out as a
Mhm.
little aside that I forgot
Mhm.
to mention in the intro is that we
Mhm.
both went to the same program for science
Yes.
illustration. So
Mhm.
I went to UC Santa Cruz's science illustration program, and it moved to
Mhm.
Monterey Bay where you went,
Yes.
Oh,
right?
wow.
I did it yeah, I did it in Monterey
Right.
Bay. Mhm.
Yeah,
Mm.
I definitely agree. It's,
Mhm.
yeah, people get it a lot more
Mhm.
easily now than they used to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, and I think it's wonderful, and I think it seems like there's a lot more people that are coming with more education in science. So people coming from
Yeah.
having completed a PhD and deciding to
Yes,
come into science
I've
communication.
seen quite a
So
bit of that too.
yeah.
I've also yeah, I the other thing that I'm kind of like that I think is really great as far as like the awareness of the importance of not just illustration but also design when it comes to science
Mhm.
um is like there's all of this, the classic color palettes that people used to use
Mhm.
in graphing programs like MATLAB and everything. Like they use these rainbow palettes that
Mhm.
as soon as it moves into grayscale, or if you have someone who is has like some kind of deficiency in their color vision, and as soon as you get into that, like they can't see it, they can't read it, and the truth is, like there has actually been research on this that like everyone else can't see it as well either. Like if it doesn't work in grayscale, it's not going to work for everyone probably.
Yeah.
So, that I've seen papers in Nature Communications about this and stuff like that. Like
Mhm.
there has been so much more awareness put on just like the visual aspect of how you present your science. And you see like what graphics are put out even by labs themselves. They're doing so much more like
Mhm.
clean and attractive kind of graphics now. So,
Mhm.
yeah, the standard has gotten way higher.
Yeah. Um, I'm trying there's so many questions I could ask you from here. I'm trying to decide which way to go. Um, but I guess so just thinking about what you help scientists with, there's so many different, um, I don't know, services, things that science
Mhm.
illustrators, designers do. So do
Yeah.
you I know you do a lot of cover art,
Yeah.
and then you do a
Mhm.
lot of, figures for journals, is that accurate?
Yes, for journals and for grant applications, as
Mhm.
well. And yeah, um, yeah, I think I work mostly directly with labs.
Mhm.
So yeah, so it kind of depends on their needs, but a lot of the time it'll be for grant applications. And sometimes people come with a really clear idea of what they need. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's not necessarily as clear until you kind of start working with them what it is that they actually need
Mhm.
for their that's most obvious actually usually during grant application processes because I think things are still kind of like in this
Uh-huh.
kind of I'm trying to find the right word. It's not exactly brainstorm, but it's like where the ideas are just kind of coming together.
Yeah.
Um
Yes.
yeah, and I've done also some illustrations of books that are more kind of either on the science on the like on the actually different kinds. There's more on popular science books, but also in some more kind of textbook type things
Mhm.
occasionally. Yeah.
Mhm.
Mhm.
I wonder if this is a good segue into kind of the AI conversation, just, like, thinking about, how these researchers come to you,
Mhm.
um, and how formed their ideas are, and if you see, them going to AI for kind of preliminary visual
Absolutely.
ideas and how you work with that, etcetera.
Yeah. I mean, it's such an appealing tool. I think it's on the one hand, I think it's really cool that someone has like an idea and they really want to know what it looks like and they can just type it in.
Yeah.
It doesn't always work, but like it is really cool that you have this really amazing kind of starting point.
Mhm.
Um and I don't, I think AI is one of these things that's like it's here, it's not going anywhere, but like what is it really? What does it really know how to do? And I do find it frustrating as far as like I think it doesn't at least currently, and obviously this is changing and improving and things like that, but I feel like it doesn't understand what it put out. And
That's for sure.
because of
That's a
that,
good
you can't
description.
edit it. You can't edit really AI work in a way that I think is effective. Um, and I think that's really frustrating because a huge part of our work as science illustrators is this iterative process where it's like you come to the scientist with something that they you think that they requested, right? But you might not have understood correctly or they might have missed something. And this
Mhm.
iterative process that like they have the ability to kind of edit and say what is correct, what is incorrect, or what is appropriate, what they would like to highlight, like all of that is something that I don't really feel like AI is equipped to do.
Right.
Um, and what is really interesting and what I find kind of difficult to explain sometimes to someone who isn't an artist is that, especially when it's something more kind of on the creative end, like a cover, which can sometimes be really kind of out there and metaphorical, and the style can be kind of wacky. So when that happens, like, it's hard to explain sometimes that the idea that's going to hit and be like the best one, um,
Mhm.
sometimes you can't necessarily anticipate it without kind of already diving into the process of making it.
Mhm.
And this whole process of doing preliminary sketches and kind of messing with ideas is something that I AI is not, it's useful, but it doesn't actually like it doesn't do that part. Like you don't you're
Yeah.
missing something when you use it.
And
It,
sometimes, sorry to
yeah.
interrupt, but it's almost like it can shove you in a box because you get fixated on, like, this one idea because 'cause you've already pictured a color version of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, I did have a cover one, like a cover recently that, or a cover. I don't know if it's gotten selected, but it's like something that I submitted recently. That they came with a really clear idea, and they came with this idea it done in AI, and I mean, being the person that doesn't particularly, this was like in a viral biology kind of world, and I didn't, I think, fully grasp the the actual physical thing that was happening.
Mhm.
And they didn't I ended up doing a sketch. They didn't really like it, and they came back with a different AI sketch of a completely different concept. And then I started digging more into the science of like what's actually happening here, and I realized
Mhm.
this the second idea wasn't right either. And so I was able to kind of come up with a better concept just through this kind of like understanding and conversation. And the
Mhm.
AI skips over that conversation. It doesn't
Yeah.
have that conversation for you.
Mhm.
So I think that's the part that's kind of, a lot of times the most interesting ideas come from that process. Yeah.
That
So
is a
that's
great
kind of one of the things I
description.
find frustrating about it. Yeah. Sorry?
Thank you.
Yeah.
No, I was just saying that your description of what AI cannot do well
Yeah.
is really helpful,
I
so thank you.
and I
Yeah.
hadn't thought about it that way. You made me think about, the programs we've explored with AI,
Mhm.
like, Firefly, I think is what it's called.
Oh,
The
I
Adobe
haven't tried
one,
that
yeah.
one. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, just how iterations work within that program and how that's really, like, where now that I think about it, I've gotten stuck. Like, I like this piece, but not like this missing the point or the background or this and yeah, just even if you know how to if you think you have the concept and you think you can, talk to the machine, even then
Mhm.
the iterative process in AI isn't where,
Yeah. The
yeah,
I think that's one of its, like, main weaknesses is this iterative,
yeah,
like, the way that
yeah,
it kind of responds to,
Mhm.
yeah, to the attempts to edit it or control it.
yeah,
Um, it doesn't want to be, yeah, it doesn't, I
Yeah.
think that it doesn't want that flexibility. What I do have in my mind kind of an imagined tool that I think would be really cool that AI could do all this stuff like that, but I don't see I don't see that in the AI that exists right now. Like, I don't see that
So
aspect. I find it more, it's not necessarily a hindrance, but it doesn't, I feel like it it sometimes kind of takes away, rather than taking away the kind of difficult part of the work or something like that, it kind of sometimes takes away, um, like, the I don't know how to, I'm trying to find the right word for this.
the
Like,
essence of what's important.
the essence or the inspiration or the sometimes even, like, the fun part, like,
Mhm.
that I feel like it's doing the wrong thing. I don't know how to explain it.
Yeah.
Like, I could
Interesting.
imagine it being, a very different tool than it is, I guess, for me.
Mhm.
Because I think the nature of what it is now is very much this thing that, it swallows a lot of images and it spits something back out, like, that's what it is.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
it's very, very powerful. But it's very, like, that's all it does, it
yeah,
really doesn't do that. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, that's interesting because Nicole and I have
Mhm.
talked about, like,
Mhm.
as you know, it being a tool, definitely not
Mhm.
replacing a human. And
Yeah.
so, you know, it could even be argued that it's not really a tool, and it's definitely nowhere near to replacing the work that we do. So, yeah,
Yeah. I
what
I don't think yeah, I don't feel it's not that yeah, I found it more useful for like I needed to translate something. So I feel like that's where it does better. It's better at
Mhm.
that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um
And I
yeah.
thinking about what you just said, I feel like this is where it's kind of a fundamental aspect of working with scientists and clients is helping them recognize, like, our expertise having done this for a really long
It's
time
true.
of helping
Yeah.
to distill their ideas. If they can try to
Mhm.
explain to us, and then we can try
Mhm.
to, like, understand what they're saying, do research,
Mhm.
ask questions. And so even
Yes.
if we are starting from a point of AI, because I think Claire had a really successful working relationship where somebody came with AI, and I think that was
Mhm.
successful because they were very open and willing to hear, like, okay,
Mhm.
I see that you like this style, but this isn't
Yeah.
accurate. Does this mean
Mhm.
anything? No, that doesn't mean anything. Does this mean anything?
Yeah.
No. And so
Yeah,
then
what
to
am I
work from
allowed to
that.
change and what am I not allowed to change? You know,
Yes.
what's important here and what's not. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah, I
whereas
think you're
some
right. You
people
really
come
do
to
yeah.
us and they're like, "I just want you to reproduce this," and they're not willing to,
Yes.
like, listen to our ideas
Yeah,
as
that's
people who've
tough,
done this.
that's tough. The other thing I've had is sometimes people come with, like, 50 sketches, and I'm like, "This but that's, like, too many that's not
Mhm.
helpful," you know?
No.
Like, 50 AI sketches, I'm like, because it takes what it does so easily, it doesn't for all the things it does so easily and can make you 50 amazing, beautiful
Mhm.
versions of something, but the something might not be quite right, and that might be because you haven't thought it through quite, you know what I mean? It might
Yeah.
be because you didn't quite get the right, um, concept or prompt or, there's
Yeah.
lots of things that could have gone wrong in that
Mhm.
process.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, I guess it doesn't definitely doesn't replace the thought process, definitely doesn't replace the, kind of, obviously the editing aspect of things and yeah, yeah, the communication aspect
Uh-huh.
is not quite
Yeah.
there.
Mm-mm.
Or at least not there yet. I don't know. Maybe it'll
Yeah.
change.
Yeah.
I did wanna mention, like, I haven't thought about this sentence in there's this thing that the teachers actually at the science illustration program said that has, like, stuck with me forever, and it's this thing where it's like writers can choose what they say and what they don't say, but
Uh-huh.
artists, like, you can't always, like, hide something. You have to sometimes put something out there even if you aren't sure about it, even if it's not
That's
quite
true.
right. Like, you're not afforded the same luxury as an artist, and I
Mhm.
haven't really thought about that in the context of AI, but actually, it really does speak to this idea of, like, there's this big difference between saying something or writing the words of the prompt for the AI and then the final pro like, there is that space between those 2 things. It's
Mhm.
really interesting to think about that in the context of, like, an AI artist rather than, like, a human artist that doesn't
Yeah, I'd
like,
never
the
thought of that
AI
before.
doesn't get he doesn't know everything just because you gave him this one prompt, you know?
Mhm.
Yeah.
I guess I'm trying to
In that sense, it's just like a yeah.
wrap my head around that phrase, like, do artists not get that luxury because of how art can be interpreted? Is that
I think it can be I encounter it even at the most basic level. Like I have, sometimes you might know as a scientist, you might know the result of something. You know something exists. You might not know exactly what it looks like. And so you might be hesitant to show you have to show the thing, but like you don't know how to represent it in a way
I
that's
see.
not, not committed. And you kind of have to put something out there. Or like it's really common when you think about paleo art and paleo reconstruction. I can't remember the name of the artist, but there's an artist from many, many, like just like many, many years ago who drew dinosaurs. He
Mhm.
didn't know what to do with their feet. And so we would just hide them behind bushes all the time. But
I
it's really
love
this
that.
thing where it's like, how much can you get away with just like hiding something?
Yeah,
You kind of have to be like willing to be wrong. You have to put it out there and be willing to be wrong.
I see.
Um,
I
yeah.
do think
Which
that
is
that's
very much
an
I said this about
area.
the Denisovan thing, because like with the ancient human reconstruction, you have to put it out there and understand that it's not like this is not a perfect thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
I do think that that's an area where sometimes the style you choose, a more, like, abstract
Mhm.
or more, like,
Oh, for sure.
purposefully
Yeah,
artsy style, like, you can
that's true.
make it clear to the audience that this is a
Mhm.
representation, and
That's
I feel
true.
like that's something when 3D art became really popular, there was a swing back to
Yeah.
more kind of, hand-drawn styles, and I
Yeah.
feel like that might be
Yeah.
happening again with AI because AI can so quickly spit out stuff that, like, looks real, but wait a second, that's like, Claire and I
Yeah.
saw this
I
squid.
agree. I think it's
It
getting like there's some things that it spits out that they're so gorgeous and so beautiful, but
Yeah.
because they're so I can see that there's this like taste kind of move away from them. And
Mhm.
actually, I have a piece that I made that I was really proud of. I made it like a couple years ago. I was really, really proud of it. I did it in Sculpey, which is also
Oh, yeah.
really frustrating. And I look at it now and it looks like something that came out of Midjourney. And I'm so irritated.
Oh,
It just
no.
doesn't look as nice as because it looks like just, and I was just thinking, I was like, I don't feel like this has the impact that it used to because now someone would look at this and just be like, "Oh," it
Yeah.
doesn't have that. So I'm actually trying to kind of think about that and be mindful of that when I'm deciding on a style for a cover. I am trying to kind of think about, you
Mhm.
know, is the most impactful style here going to be something really, really slick looking and, really, yeah. And sometimes the answer is no, because it really does give that kind of vibe. And
Mhm.
journals don't wanna put that on their covers a lot of them
Yeah.
are really kind of being very clear that they don't wanna put that on their covers. Um,
Mhm.
so, yeah, and so I'm trying to be mindful of that, when I'm thinking about styles for cover art particularly,
Mhm.
yeah. Um
So, can I ask you if you have a favorite project that you've worked on? Something that
Yeah.
you
Yeah, so I've done wow, there's a few things that I'm really proud of and I really loved actually
Okay.
working at the LAC. That was a really fun job. But a few years ago I made a sort of reconstruction is the word, but it's kind of not a traditional reconstruction of a Denisovan girl who are a group of ancient humans that were discovered through their DNA. So they're unique because initially the initial findings were just of a pinky bone and I think a molar or two molars.
Mhm.
And they were discovered because they had genetic material. They were able to kind of sequence the DNA and they were able to say, oh, wait, this isn't a Neanderthal and it isn't a modern human. It's something different. Or modern human in this case is like ancient versions of us.
Yeah.
Um, so they said, okay, we're going to call this a Denisovan, but those are the only findings. And because they're kind of defined by their DNA, you kind of have this question mark as to what the rest of their kind of anatomy looks like.
Mhm.
And there's a lab at Hebrew University that did a epigenetic analysis looking at methylation patterns on the DNA
Cool.
and comparing them between different species. And this is like a
Perfect.
very short version of that and basically coming up with a list of expected traits. And they had this error of they did an error kind of analysis and to see sort of how well does their system work. And they came up with about 85% accuracy, is the kind of assumed accuracy from this analysis. And so I basically got some Excel sheets with lists of traits, and the traits are comparative. So they're comparing modern humans and Denisovans and Neanderthals, and that was kind of what I was working from.
That
And,
sounds fun.
it was really cool. It was really, really cool, and, it started with kind of illustrating skulls and skeletons,
Mhm.
that are of modern humans and Neanderthals, because those are the closest relatives, and then doing kind of a comparison to the expectation of what we would see within a Denisovan. And then for the cover, they wanted to do a facial reconstruction of Denisova 3, which is the girl who they found her pinky bone. She was, like, probably around maybe 13 to 15, kind of that's
And I can't
the
remember,
guessed
where did they
age, as
find
close
it?
as they can guess. Sorry?
Where did they find her pinky bone? I'm just
Oh,
curious.
Denisova Cave, it's in Siberia in Russia.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
And they've found since then some molars. They found some things, in yeah, there have been additional findings since then.
Mhm.
Um, but and additional like methods of analysis and things like that. But yeah, so the facial reconstruction was really cool because I did get to sculpt it, and
Well,
um yeah, it's my favorite because it was such a long process too, because I worked in it not entire over the entirety of 2 years, but it was this thing that was like this ongoing project that in different periods of time I would come back to. Um yes, so it was very,
yeah.
very cool. And she was on the cover of Cell in 2019, so very
Oh,
fun. Uh, yeah, and
Yeah,
I got
it's
to
a
do it
very
again too, which was also cool. Yeah.
I was just gonna say it's a very iconic image, but
Yes,
I
it
didn't
is.
realize
If
that
you Google
that
it,
you
it pops
spent so
up.
long. Yeah.
If we're talking about like you have to put something out there, it's because we put something out there, because
Mhm.
there's a lot you can kind of say, you don't have a skull, you don't have a skeleton. It's like, yes, that's true. This is our best attempt, at the
Mhm.
given of with what we have kind of, and
Mhm.
with all of the analysis, with all of the data, this was the best attempt. Um but yeah, it got a lot it got a lot of attention.
yeah.
Um and not yeah, and I really felt like what was difficult for me was a lot of the work of the illustrator. And in general, like the work itself was kind of it was because it got press attention, it was very kind of easy to look at it as this thing that's like, oh, science has decided this is what it looks like, or it sounded like it got spit out of a computer. It sounded like it got spit out of AI, whereas like nothing could be further from the truth.
Yeah.
Um, and so I felt like even back then, which is obviously before kind of the tools that we have now, I felt like the idea of the whole process was being erased, which was doing a disservice both to me, like as the artist, but also like it's a
Yeah.
real disservice to kind of the scientific process involved, and a disservice to, this is kind of our process. This is the openness of like what science and what peer review is. You put out your whole process, you put out all of the information so that it
Mhm.
undergo peer review, um, and publication, and respond to reviewers and all of this process. And it's like it became this real kind of like um to make it appear as though they punched it into a computer and then like this came out. Obviously, not everyone did that, but it was because it got all this attention, it kind of happened. And what you were saying about style is like, I do kind of wonder what would have happened if we had done a less kind of realistic style. What would have happened if things had been a little bit more kind
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
a little more subtle? Like maybe it wouldn't have, like maybe it wouldn't have gotten like this. I don't know. Actually, I don't know if that's what would have happened, but it does make me wonder. Yeah.
And I feel
Yeah.
like that's where I've seen so much, like, criticism from a general public, like, other like,
Mhm.
Nat Geo posting other,
Mhm.
you know, recreations of what a human might have looked like
Mm.
back,
Yeah.
in whatever period. I feel like that's
Yeah.
always gotten so much negative attention, and
It always does,
yeah.
yeah, and it comes from every angle too. It comes
Mhm.
from, like, people who, are like, "Oh, they're so ugly," or it comes from this thing where it's like, "Oh, this is, like, appropriating a particular, like, cultural group or ethnic group." Like, it comes from every angle. It makes everyone really, really mad, unfortunately. Not everyone, but it
But
does,
people
like,
are really
because we have a really emotional response to, like, images of people.
Yeah.
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 That's what I was gonna say is that we're so fascinated about it too, though, and I think that people
Yeah,
really
it's true.
want to see something that's
Mhm.
as realistic as possible to try to imagine, like, what this
Yeah, it's
being
true.
was like. So
Yes, it's true.
And
mm,
I think something you commented on just now about, like, your artistic process and how it really did follow a scientific process, or
Mhm.
it accompanied the scientific process,
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
how that's not assumed when people see art, even if
No.
it is science art, and in this case, I
Yeah.
think it's such a clear example of the research that we do as science
Yeah.
illustrators that is
Yeah.
so overlooked, and,
Yeah.
mhm.
why AI really isn't applicable in our case, because there
Yeah.
is research there, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
interesting.
That's a good point. I didn't think about it that way, but yeah, you're right. It does really take away from the research that we do as part of the artwork that we do, because we have to.
Mhm,
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. It's
mhm.
it's it's inescapable. Like research is a significant portion of our time. Yeah.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Thank you so much for walking us through all of that. There's
Yeah.
so many details there that I did not realize.
Yeah, I can
Yeah.
I yeah, can talk I've actually given a couple of talks about it, and I'm actually trying to do that more because of the issue of, like, kind of not showing our work. I was
Uh-huh.
like, "Well, we need to talk about this and what this work actually is."
Uh-huh.
So I feel like it's a good example of something that's a real kind of, like, a real labor,
Uh-huh.
and with a lot of different steps. So, yeah, so it's something that I've talked about it in the past, and now I'm kind of trying to talk about more, and it's, like, just a good kind of it's a good example case to kind of talk about, you know?
Mhm. Definitely.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So I have so much more that I could ask you, but we are coming to the end of our conversation. So I think both Claire and I are curious to wrap
Mhm,
up. If
mhm.
you could think of advice that you would give yourself. So
Oh.
either, I mean, if you want to think about your daughter and kind of like
Mhm.
what you would have told yourself at her age or would tell
Mm.
her, or maybe a little
Wow.
bit further along, what?
Probably a little further along, because
Okay.
I feel like I was dealing with very different things, I think, when I was 6.
Yeah.
My daughter's in 1st grade.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I don't know if I have any kind of clear advice, beyond just kind of being open, because I think, like, the world is changing so much, and,
Mhm.
um, yeah, and I'm really interested to see kind of what happens. Um, I know it's not the easiest time for scientists to kind of think about what's happening, but I think just being open, because opportunities do present themselves. You kind of have to find one when you see one. Um,
Uh-huh.
yeah, I think that's the best that's the best
I
advice I can get from these circumstances.
I
Yeah.
think that's great advice. Yeah.
I
Actually works
agree.
for 6-year-olds too. It's not too
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think I love that. I was watching an interview, I think it was William Dafoe who
Oh, wow.
plays, like, the Green Goblin. He's, the actor,
Mhm.
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
think it was something along those lines of, "My advice would be not to take anyone's advice, like, carve your own
Mm.
path." Um,
Oh,
which is,
bold.
speaks to that staying open and yeah,
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. Which
Yeah.
sounds easy, but I think in practice is much harder to apply than one realizes,
Yeah.
because a lot of times I look back at myself at different stages and I'm like, "Oh, I
Mhm.
was so tunnel visioned and I didn't even realize
Mhm.
it."
Yeah,
Um,
that's true. Mhm.
but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's true.
So,
Thank you so much for having me. This was really, interesting. You guys are always have really interesting, topics, and yeah, it's really lovely to chat with you and to get
yeah.
your opinion on the AI kind of situation too, because that's always really fascinating.
I know. I On one hand, I don't wanna talk about AI anymore because 'cause I'm sick of it,
Mm,
but on the other
it's
hand, there's
true.
so
We
many
can't stop
different
talking about it.
things
Yeah.
I feel like we could, like, continue for another hour talking about, so we'll have to have you
Yeah.
on again and
Yes.
talk about more things
Mhm.
that are impacting science and communication of science,
Yeah.
so
Mhm.
well, thank you so
Yeah.
much for your time. It's been wonderful talking to you today. Um,
You
yeah.
too. This was really fun.
Yeah, thank
Alright.
you everyone for listening, and if you enjoyed our conversation and would like to hear more, please don't forget to like and subscribe below, and yeah, we'll be back soon.